What's going on, guys? Bengal here. Today I'm going to tell you how to scout and draft the best players possible in Madden 25. There are a number of things you're going to want to do when setting it up. If you're new to the game, if you haven't played the last couple of years, you might not know exactly how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and break down exactly what you need to do in order to scout the best way possible and end up drafting the best players that you possibly can. So with that being said, everything happens at the start of the regular season for the most part. That's where the bulk of the setup will take place. You don't have to do anything in preseason, but there are a number of weeks that you're going to have to keep an eye on, right? So the first thing you're going to do is choose your draft class. Typically, I like to do the auto-generated rookies for the majority of my rebuilds. However, if you've downloaded something from the file share, you can import that if you want a real 2025 NFL draft class. So that's a possibility, but we'll keep auto-generated rookies, far easier for here. And it gives you a little tutorial, but it can be maybe a little bit vague. So here are the weeks that we're going to need to keep an eye on, right? So key info, week 1, that's the hire and assign scouts, aka fire all of your scouts and align them with the interests of not only your team, but the best players in the draft. Week 3, you select a focus position for each region scout. We'll do that in week 3. I'll show you that. Week 8 is the national focus position, so to speak. And then week 13, you're selecting 3 prospects for focus scouting. I believe you unlock 40 extra percent. And this year, 90% reveals the true draft talent. It used to be 100 only, but now 90% does. So it should be easier to draft these players, you know, the best players possible, more than ever. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is check the region breakdown. It will pretty much tell you who the best players in the draft are. So if you look at the strengths of not only the national area, right, but you can sort it by every single region. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the best player in the entire draft is a corner. I'm not sure exactly how they quantify that, or qualify that, should I say, but typically that's where the best depth is going to be, and you are still going to see quite good players at those positions. So corner, quarterback, and wide receiver nationally, and you can also see that's going to be pretty true of the West as well, except instead of wide receiver, it's defensive tackle. Central also has QB, left outside linebacker, left end. And the weaknesses, it seems like a lot of offensive line, especially on the interior. But here is my big tip for you, right? If, let's say, you were looking at the national big picture, the strengths of the class: corner, quarterback, and wide receiver. Let's say you don't need any of those positions. Well, to me, it wouldn't make very much sense to have your national scout expertise be quarterback and wide receiver. If you're not going to be drafting any of those guys, especially not high, doesn't really make any sense to align that. Yeah, sure, you get a 15% efficiency boost for the highest strength of that region, but it doesn't make any sense if you're not going to draft them. And I know what you might be thinking, well, how do I know if I'm going to draft them? It's week 1. And it's not even that you'll have an idea of who you are going to draft, but positions that you're going to totally avoid. If you are the Chargers or the Bengals or the Ravens, a number of these teams, Chiefs obviously, you're not going to have your main scout be a quarterback guy. You don't need a quarterback. It doesn't make any sense. Your national scout should always be tier 3 though, no matter what. You don't need the binoculars to the left of the position in the top left. You don't need that to be aligned if you're not going to be drafting a position. So right now it says position mismatch in this region. You may want to reassign or hire a new scout, but you don't necessarily want to do that, right? Because if you don't need a defensive tackle, there's no point in getting a 15% efficiency boost on defensive tackle if you're not going to draft one. And if you look into the region prospects, right, if there's not a defensive tackle in here that's interesting to you, let's say there's one at rank number 13 here, there's one at number 18, but again, if you're not going to consider defensive tackle, who cares if you get them up to 100% efficiency? You won't be drafting them. So look through early, see if anybody in particular stands out. This is a very strong quarterback class, and let's say we want to draft a quarterback. I'm the 49ers. We sure could use one. So we'll go ahead and go to our scouts here and try to align it. People are going to be so mad at that. Brock Purdy's actually, it's incredible how well he's played. He hasn't been like the best quarterback in the league or anything, but his numbers are phenomenal. He's been so good within the Kyle Shanahan offense. but this was not the same player that I saw at Iowa State. It's actually incredible how much he's developed. And I will also tell you, typically I would not recommend heavily scouting quarterback because typically there's only going to be a few that are actually worth looking at, and you can make those guys your focus players, and you can find out about them. Typically, and again, that doesn't mean always, but typically, there are so few quarterbacks that you might actually even have a chance to draft or consider drafting. You know, there are 6 here in the top 6, which is insane. Or 5 here in the top 6, excuse me. But typically, there's not going to be that many. So you don't need to go ahead and scout the entire quarterback class when there's not even many draftable players. You'd rather do that for wide receiver because there are way more of them. So we're going to make our tier 3 scout wide receiver and corner. You can do that by going into manage scouts, free agent scouts. You can sort by tier 3, but it's oftentimes just easier to sort by the position you want. So Alicia Tranquil here is a 3-star national scout is what she's going to be. Expertise in corner and receiver. So for the entire draft class now, as long as we remember to set our focus scouting position for one of those positions, we're going to get 15% efficiency boost on scouting that particular region. All you have to do is assign the scout. Again, tier 3 should always be national to get as many players scouted as much as you possibly can. And just because I've said it, don't align necessarily, your scout with the quarterback, that's true for national. You could still very much do it for particular regions. And let's say you see 2 quarterbacks in this top class. We know there happen to be, quite a few of them. You could, still do quarterback regionally, but still, I just feel like you limit your total positions that you can scout by doing that, or total players, just because there are typically way more offensive tackles or draftable wide receivers, corners, defensive ends, safeties even. But you still could do it for one particular region. Let's say, or I guess more if you wanted to, but let's say we, really like the look of Tyrone Bryson and Scott Walton here, Nevada Dynasty. Shout out College Football 25 on my channel. But, there are a number of really good quarterbacks in this class, so it's kind of a weird example, but we could do, quarterback for Central, let's say, or West. It's a possibility. It's the strength of both of those regions, but again, you kind of limit your options slightly. I know this probably goes without saying for a lot of you, but for new people to football, I do get some of you guys. So if you're looking for RE and LE, right end and left end, you can't find that. It's because it's listed as defensive end, which is the total position, right? So I know this can seem obvious for 99% of my fan base, but DE is left end and right end. And I would probably recommend lining these up, even if you don't line up the national one. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to line it up, which means you get the binoculars in the top left. You're matching 2 out of a possible 2. You can't do all 3. There's no, scout that's going to have 3 different positions. They can have 2 different ones, and some of them can be very different, like quarterback and cornerback, or they can be very similar, like outside linebacker and defensive end, which depending on the scheme, that player could play essentially the same role. So we've aligned everything, but now there's nothing left to do. The scouting is going to happen up until week 3, and then we can set the focus position. And I would say if you want the efficiency boost, which is an extra 15, 10, or 5% depending on the strength of your scout. For tier 3, it's going to be a 15% efficiency boost when scouting their expertise positions, right? So you do want to align it. It makes more sense to do so. So now that we're to week 3, this is important to note, this is week 3. You can set your focus scouting positions for your individual regions. So I've decided to go corner. Again, with QB, I think it makes more sense typically to use them as a focus player, not always. And you don't even need to necessarily scout them all the way through to know if they're going to be good or not. So Tyrone Bryson at week 3 is already 15% scouted. You get some of these physicals unlocked. Let's say I need someone with elite throw power to be draftable, right? To even consider drafting them. Well, Tyrone Bryson doesn't have any chance at elite. Maybe I remove him from my mental board and we don't have to further scout him. Now, we are going to see, even if you do nothing, you are going to see more of these core attributes start to reveal. This is very early in the season, even if you did nothing by the time you get to the draft, you'll have some idea about them. So again, I typically avoid quarterback for your regional scouting, but I've picked outside linebacker, wide receiver, over safety, just because even though safety is apparently the number one strength of the region, I don't think it's guaranteed that the safety is the number one player in the draft in the Northeast. Don't think that's a guarantee. There are more wide receivers than safeties. Again, if we really want to know about Tramel Kaiser, the safety, we can just make him a focus player at either week 13 or in the offseason. You have 6 total players you can do. You can even double up on one if you want. But just set focus scouting in the bottom left here and scroll over to whatever position you want. There are just more draftable receivers than safeties, typically. Again, I say typically. I keep saying typically because this can change. It's not going to be true of every single class. But, again, typically more. So set your focus positions, and you'll see when it comes time to set your national focus at the midseason mark, we're going to have a pretty good idea about a lot of these guys, and the national focus scouting is going to reveal a ton of information, by the time we get to the offseason. Okay, week 8, it is time to set our scouting national focus. So, if we check out region prospects here, you can see that the percentage is actually fairly significant on some of these players because we had outside linebacker set as a regional focus for, what was this? Was it Central, right? The outside linebackers are already 50% scouted, which is, in some cases, more than enough to know if they're good or not. B block should A pursuit, B tackle. We can see the physical range if we're looking for, great or good speed. And for a pass rush type player, you don't necessarily need them to be, running a 4.4, okay? Like 4.7 would be totally fine. Although in Madden, you're typically going to get some pretty fast rush outside linebackers. A pursuit's great. A to C power moves has potential. We want to find out more about that. It'll continue to get revealed over the course of the season, but it's week 8. It's time to set our scouting national focus. What I would recommend doing, you see the expertise of our main scout is corner and wide receiver. Check out both of those positions, right? If there are a lot of receivers that you might consider, this particular class only has 2 round 1 projected corners, receivers, doesn't mean necessarily that there are only 2 round 1 quality wide receivers, but a lower chance, of course. And then at corner, there are a lot of round 1 and then round 1 to 2 corners. So I guess maybe just look at all of them, see what the biggest needs are on your team, see who fits the best, right? And, make a decision based off that. I would look in and I would see, okay, are any of the receivers really, really fast? Or are they really athletic in general, right? And then make a decision off that. I would say there are more corners. I'm probably more interested in corner. Let's go ahead and make corner our main focus scouting position for our national scout. And we're really going to have a phenomenal idea about corners by the time we get to the offseason. So we will simulate to the offseason. We don't have to do anything for scouting until deep into the offseason. So we are totally good for now. That's not true. Week 13. Oh my goodness. Week 13 is focus players. How did I forget that I didn't do that? That was a good catch, though. That was a good catch because this is week 12. In week 13, oh my goodness. In week 13, scouting focus players will pop up. Saved it just in time. And this might be, okay, I'm really more interested in learning about these quarterbacks, right? Tyson Alexander, we have no idea about medium accuracy. We have no idea about short accuracy. He's the number 1 player in the draft, but we know that he does have for sure a deep accuracy, a throw under pressure, elite to great throw power, elite to great change of direction. Overall, he looks amazing. Could be a top 5 player in the class. I want to find out for sure. Let's just say I want to find out for sure about the top 3 quarterbacks. I'll make them my 3 focus players, and I think we're going to gain an extra 40% on those players individually. So we're going to have a really, really good idea of whether they're going to be draftable players or not. And now, we don't have anything to do until deep into the offseason. Now, we're going to be good. Okay, so we're kind of deep into the offseason now. Skipping free agency, obviously not the point of this video. Mock Draft 5 has come out. It comes out a little bit earlier now than it used to. I think previously it was at the free agent recap spot. Now, that's not until we actually make our decision on the private workouts, which is just 3 more focus players. Now, as you'll be able to see, right, because we have added the extra 40% onto the quarterbacks, we have them completely top scouted, right? So they were each at 40% or 45%, maybe in the case of Tyrone Bryson. We've added a ton of percentage onto these guys. We know for sure they are both top 5 talents in the draft. So that is not a guess. It's not they could be. It's not it matches their projection. It is for sure when the overalls are revealed, they will without question be within the top 5 overalls in the entire class. Now, let's say the top 4 are 80 overalls, which is not going to happen likely, but let's just say that it is. And then the next 10 are all 75. Technically, that would still be a top 5 talent, right? But number 5 could tie with the number 10 overall player, or number 15 even, in theory. So you still want to look at these guys and say, okay, well, we checked out Tyrone Bryson. We know he's a top 5 talent. His accuracy overall is pretty good. He's only 21 years old with a great arm. But maybe, to me, he doesn't look quite as good as Tyson Alexander does. And I would prefer to take Tyson Alexander, which actually does end up being true. His accuracy is still awesome. He's got A's all over the place, which, long story short, you're looking for the A grades because that's the highest possible thing they can get. A can vary. A can be an 85 overall at that particular attribute. It can be 90 plus overall. For running back, juke move A can be like 85 or it can be 99. So you're looking for A overall. You're looking for these generational type players. I typically like to draft the better athletes. At quarterback, maybe it's a little bit less important. I typically like to draft the younger players because there's more development time there. Those are things I'm typically looking for. And I'm saying typically more than I typically do. And also the cool thing about, using your focus players in scouting, well, you don't have to do any of the positions, right, that you had previously scouted. That's part of the reason why this exists. There can still be good players that are not within the strength of the region. And even though safety even though it wasn't a national great position, I look at Tramel Kaiser and I see a zone archetype safety. So his zone coverage will be high, probably an A. He has A tackle, B man coverage, A hit power. Doesn't look to be the best athlete, only solid speed, which is about average. Probably mid to high 80s, I would bet. Maybe close to a 90. But didn't run all that well. But overall, very, very good player. Just not the best athlete. But if we were to make him a focus player, we'll get his true talent revealed. Because we will get it well beyond that 90% threshold. And I think he's going to be at minimum a round 1 talent just with the eye test, and you'll have a better understanding of that as you continue to scout players and see. But I would recommend using your focus players to reveal true talents. So you're getting an extra 40%. You got to get up to 90 now to get that true talent revealed. I wouldn't do it just in general. I want to get true talent grades revealed to kind of have the cheat sheet on where these guys are actually going to fall within the class. So that's the main goal. I will pick the quarterback Richard Reed here as well. He could be a top 5 talent. He has B medium accuracy, A short, could be A deep, A throw under pressure. But use your focus players, or private workouts in this case, to reveal true talents, which you pretty much can for all of these guys now at this point. Because if they have 60%, you can get them up to a point where you're going to know for sure. And it's kind of like unveiling a cheat sheet. Running backs with A juke are always awesome. And again, not really for quarterback necessarily, but overall, if you see any athlete like type player, like someone with elite or great to elite everything, they're probably just going to be unbelievable. High chance of that. We can go ahead and pause the draft, look at the draft board, and we can reveal, we can even sort. We know the 2 quarterbacks are top 5 talents, but if we sort, see what we've done is we have Josh Ross revealed to be a true top 5 talent. We have Tramel Kaiser revealed to be a true top 5 talent. So we know 4 out of the best 5 players in the entire draft. We know that for a fact. I don't know why they've sorted it this way, right? But we also know multiple other guaranteed round 1 talents for sure. And then we can see steals even, right? So we have a corner here projected to go maybe in the back end of the first round or in the second round. He is 23 years old, so a bit of an older prospect as far as they go, but guaranteed to be a top 5 talent with A-man, B-press, B-zone, great speed. So he's going to end up being, probably a top 5 talent. We know that for a fact. I would also say a nice tip for you guys is if you didn't know, it's important to check out the mock draft prior to the draft. It's usually a really good indicator of when these guys are going to come off the board, and you can, trade up according to that mock draft. Again, typically, it's going to be very accurate, which in my opinion is something they need to change. It makes it more challenging, which, oh man, I don't have the cheat sheet of when a player is going to get drafted, but that's part of the appeal of the actual draft, is the chaos. We need teams trading up, which doesn't happen either. So we ended up moving around in the draft, and we did very, very well. Why am I showing you the draft screen afterwards? Well, I accidentally stopped my recording. Very cool. Thankfully, we didn't miss a whole ton. And my main point here, we do end up having great players. We picked number 1, 15, and 19. You should get some really good players, right? And the true talent, Tyson Alexander, was the best player in the draft. We got him at 1, traded all the way up. 81 overall. Now, unfortunately, I checked it out in Edit Player, and I would never do that in a rebuild, but for the sake of this video, I did check it out. 81 overall for a QB is phenomenal, by the way. Unfortunately, even though he's the number 1 overall player in the class, only star dev, which can happen, right? But with the rate that you actually find generational players in these drafts, you're probably around low to mid 80s, sometimes even higher than that. Those guys are guaranteed to be superstar X factors. So if you draft enough best players in the class every time you draft, you're going to get superstar X factors guaranteed, right? In my Cardinals rebuild that I did on stream, we ended up with multiple superstar X factor draft picks, very, very good players. So I feel like they're coming out fairly frequently in Madden 25. Tramel Kaiser, though, number 2 overall player in the class, only normal development. Not the fastest ever, but very good zone coverage, very good hit power overall. Just a really solid player right out of the draft. Another top 5 player was Josh Ross. He was the number 4 ranked player in the class. Also only star development, but another really, really solid player. When you scout correctly, you find the information. Chris Hayward was the number 34 player, 36. We got him at the end of the 4th round. So if you scout correctly, you will have a lot of info on some of the best players in the entire draft. Again, we got the first rated player at number 1. I know we picked again at 15, but we got the second highest rated player, and they might have been even available further down the draft board. Tyrone Bryson was a 78. Kari Garland was a 78, and this is what I was talking about earlier with, guys can tie for that overall. If 78 were to go down further, but Josh Ross, 78 overall. 3 out of the top 4 or 5 players, really 3 out of the first 3 in terms of rating. We got the 3 best players in the draft, 2 of them outright, and then other one joint 3rd highest rated, right, with Josh Ross. But scouting correctly will give you information you can use to make those picks and get the best players possible. A lot of 76 overall players. The difference maybe isn't exactly drastic. I would say if you're playing the games, focus on athletes that you can develop, right? See who can run. Sort your draft board by elite speed, depending on the position, or elite strength, elite whatever you're looking for, okay? Sort by combine stats. Look at the 40 time. Look at the 3-cone, the bench press. Use everything at your advantage, at your disposal to your advantage, I should say. So that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys learned something. Look for the A grades if you can. Look for the best athletes. And look for the true talent grades. Get those guys scouted as much as you can. Find out their true talent at 90%. And I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.